June 13, 1971, Frank Sinatra's retirement concert. The entire entertainment industry was there to say goodbye. Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, Dean Martin, every major star. But when Sammy Davis Jr. walked on stage to perform his tribute, he didn't sing the song Frank expected. Instead, he sang One for My Baby, the song Frank sang when he was heartbroken, the song that represented every low moment they'd survived together. Halfway through the second verse, Frank Sinatra, the toughest man in show business, the man who never showed weakness, started crying. Not quiet tears, full shoulder-shaking sobs in front of 3,000 people. Because Sammy wasn't just singing, he was saying goodbye to 30 years of brotherhood that was ending that night. The announcement had come 6 months earlier, in January 1971. Frank Sinatra, at 55 years old, was retiring from show business. After 30 years of performing, recording, acting and living in the spotlight, Frank said he was done. He wanted to spend time with his family, play golf, enjoy life away from the constant pressure of being Frank Sinatra. The news shocked the entertainment world. Frank wasn't just a singer, he was an institution. He'd survived career collapses and comebacks, personal scandals and triumphs. He'd outlasted every trend, every competitor, every prediction of his demise. And now, he was choosing to walk away on his own terms. But there would be one final concert, one last night to celebrate the career, the music, the legend. June 13th, 1971. At the Los Angeles Music Center, a farewell concert that would become known as the main event. Planning the concert took months. Every major star wanted to participate. The guest list read like a who's who of American entertainment: Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, Dean Martin, Rosemary Clooney, Don Rickles, Nancy Sinatra, Frank Jr., and dozens more. 3,000 tickets sold out within hours. The event would be filmed for television and recorded for a live album. But for Sammy Davis Jr., this wasn't just another industry event. This was saying goodbye to the man who'd changed his life. Their friendship had started in 1941, when Sammy was 15 years old, and Frank was just beginning to break out with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra. Over 30 years, they'd become closer than brothers. Frank had fought for Sammy when nobody else would. When Sammy lost his eye in 1954, Frank visited him in the hospital and told him his career wasn't over. When Sammy faced death threats for marrying a white woman in 1960, Frank provided security and support. When mobsters tried to shake down Sammy, Frank made calls that kept him safe. And through all of it, through the highs and lows, the triumphs and tragedies, they'd shared one song that meant something special to both of them. One for My Baby and One More for the Road. It was Frank's song, really. He'd made it famous. A torch song about sitting at a bar after closing time, drinking alone, nursing heartbreak and regrets. Frank sang it when he was sad, when he was drunk, when he needed to feel something real. It was the anti-performance, raw, honest, vulnerable. But Sammy knew it too. Frank had sung it to him dozens of times over the years, after bad breakups, after career disappointments, after fights with people they loved. The song had become their private language for pain, a way of saying, "I understand," without having to explain. The night of June 13th arrived. The Los Angeles Music Center was transformed into a shrine to Frank Sinatra. Red carpet, spotlights, cameras everywhere, 3,000 people in formal attire, the cream of Hollywood society, mixing with music industry executives and die-hard fans who'd somehow scored tickets. Backstage was controlled chaos. Performers arriving, rehearsing, coordinating timing. Frank himself was in his dressing room, unusually quiet. Dean Martin kept trying to make him laugh. Frank smiled, but his heart wasn't in the jokes. The concert started at 8 p.m. One by one, the stars performed. Bing Crosby sang a medley of their duets. Bob Hope delivered jokes about Frank's temper and generosity. Dean Martin sang "Everybody Loves Somebody" and made everyone laugh by changing the lyrics to reference Frank. Nancy Sinatra performed "These Boots Are Made for Walkin'" and then sang a touching "My Way" to her father. Each tribute was beautiful, professional, heartfelt. Frank sat in the wings, watching, smiling, waving when appropriate. He didn't cry. Frank Sinatra didn't cry in public. He'd built a career on being tough, controlled. The man who faced everything with a wise crack and a swagger. 2 hours into the concert, it was Sammy's turn. Backstage, just before he went on, Dean pulled Sammy aside. "Don't make it too sad, Charlie. Frank's barely holding it together as it is." Sammy nodded, but said nothing, because he'd already made his decision. He wasn't going to sing something safe. He wasn't going to do an upbeat tribute that would make everyone feel good. He was going to sing the truth. The announcer's voice rang through the auditorium. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sammy Davis Jr." Sammy walked on stage to thunderous applause. 3,000 people standing, cheering. Frank standing too, from his position in the wings, applauding his friend. Sammy waited for the applause to die down. Then he spoke, his voice carrying through the sound system. "Frank, I've been thinking for months about what to sing tonight. Everyone's been asking me, what are you going to perform? What tribute are you going to give? And I kept thinking about all the songs we've sung together over 30 years. Me and My Shadow, The Lady Is a Tramp. All the duets, all the performances." Frank was smiling, nodding, probably expecting one of those songs. "But then I realized," Sammy continued, "that the song I need to sing tonight isn't one of the happy ones. It's the one you sang to me when I was in the hospital in 1954, thinking my career was over. It's the one you sang when your heart was broken, and you needed a friend to understand without words. It's the one that means something real to both of us. Frank, this is for you." Sammy turned to the orchestra. "One for my baby." There was a ripple through the audience. This wasn't an expected choice. "One for My Baby" wasn't a celebration song. It was melancholy, bittersweet, heavy with emotion. In the wings, Dean Martin turned to someone and muttered, "Oh no, he's going to destroy him." The orchestra began the introduction. Soft, moody, intimate. Sammy stepped to the microphone, and when he started singing, something was different. This wasn't Sammy the entertainer. This was Sammy the friend. "It's 2:45. There's no one in the place except you and me." Frank was watching from the wings, still composed, still the tough guy, but his jaw had tightened slightly. "So set 'em up, Joe. I got a little story you ought to know." Sammy wasn't performing to the audience. He was singing to Frank, making eye contact, singing the lyrics like he was having a conversation. "We're drinking, my friend, to the end of a brief episode." The audience was completely silent now. Even in a room of 3,000 people, it felt intimate, like eavesdropping on a private moment. "Make it one for my baby, and one more for the road." First verse done. Frank was still holding it together. Barely, his hands were gripping the side curtain. Sammy moved into the second verse. The verse that got personal, that talked about a romance that didn't work out, about dreams that died, about accepting endings. "I got the routine, so drop another nickel in the machine." Frank's eyes were glistening now. Dean Martin, standing beside him, put a hand on his shoulder. "I'm feeling so bad. Won't you make the music easy and sad?" That's when it happened. Halfway through the second verse, on the line, "I'm feeling so bad," Frank Sinatra started crying. Not the quiet, dignified tears that people cry at weddings or funerals. Full, uncontrolled sobbing. His shoulders shook. He put his hand over his face, trying to hide it. But everyone could see. The toughest man in show business, the man who'd faced down mobsters and critics and personal demons, was crying like a child. Dean Martin wrapped his arm around Frank. Nancy Sinatra, watching from the other side of the stage, started crying too. The camera operators, who'd been filming everything, didn't know whether to focus on Sammy performing or Frank breaking down. Sammy saw it, saw Frank crying. For a split second, he almost stopped, almost broke character. But he kept singing, because this was the gift. This was what Frank needed: permission to feel, to be vulnerable, to let 30 years of emotions pour out in a safe space. "I could tell you a lot, but you got to be true to your code." In the audience, people were crying now too, not because they were sad, but because they were witnessing something sacred. The most famous tough guy in America, showing his humanity, being loved enough by a friend to be allowed to break. "Make it one for my baby, and one more for the road." The song built to its climax. Sammy's voice getting stronger, more powerful, carrying all the love and gratitude and goodbye that couldn't be spoken in regular words. That long, long road. The orchestra held the final note. Sammy stood at the microphone, looking at Frank, who was still crying, not even trying to hide it anymore. The audience erupted, not with the usual applause, but with something deeper: respect, recognition of having witnessed something real. 3,000 people on their feet, many of them crying too. Sammy bowed, then turned and walked toward the wings, toward Frank. Frank met him halfway, pulling Sammy into an embrace. Both men crying now, holding each other like they were the only two people in the world. "You son of a bitch," Frank whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You couldn't just sing My Way like everyone else." "You don't need another My Way," Sammy whispered back. "You needed to know that I remember all of it. The hospital, the fights, the low moments, and I'm grateful for every single one because you were there." Frank pulled back, looked at Sammy, tears still streaming down his face. "Best 30 years of my life," Sammy said. They stood there for a moment, backstage at the Los Angeles Music Center, while the audience continued applauding and the concert coordinators tried to figure out how to transition to the next segment. Finally, Frank said, "I'm not really retiring, you know." Sammy smiled. "I know. This is all bullshit. I'll be back on stage within a year." "I know," Sammy repeated. "But tonight matters anyway. Because even if you come back tomorrow, we're not 30 years old anymore. Things change. We change. And we needed to mark this moment, to say what needed to be said." Frank nodded, wiping his eyes. "Thank you. Thank you," Sammy replied. "For everything. For seeing me when nobody else did. For fighting for me. For being my brother." The rest of the concert continued. Frank performed his closing set. My Way, New York, New York, all the expected songs. He'd regained his composure, back to being the chairman of the board, the confident showman. But everyone who was there that night remembered Sammy's tribute, the song that made Frank Sinatra cry, the moment when the toughest man in show business let himself be vulnerable, the tribute that was really a thank you, a goodbye and a promise that the brotherhood would survive whatever came next. And Sammy was right about Frank coming back. Less than 2 years later, in 1973, Frank Sinatra announced he was returning to performing. The retirement had been real while it lasted, But the music pulled him back. He would continue performing for another 20 years, until he physically couldn't anymore. But June 13th, 1971, remained special, because on that night, in front of 3,000 people, two friends said goodbye to something that couldn't be recaptured. The 30 years when they were young and invincible, when the world was theirs to conquer, when brotherhood meant everything. Years later, in 1989, a reporter asked Sammy about that night. Frank was still alive then, still performing occasionally, both men now in their 60s. "Why did you choose One for My Baby?" the reporter asked. "Why not something celebratory?" Sammy thought for a moment. Because Frank didn't need another standing ovation that night. He'd gotten dozens of them. He needed to know that someone understood the cost of 30 years at the top, the loneliness, the pressure, the sacrifices. One for My Babies is about sitting alone at a bar, nursing pain that can't be fixed. That's what fame is sometimes. And I wanted Frank to know that I understood, that he wasn't alone in understanding that. And the crying. The crying was Frank, finally letting go of having to be tough all the time. For 3 minutes, he could just be human, just be my friend. Not the legend, not the tough guy, not the chairman of the board, just Frank. And that's the greatest gift you can give someone you love, permission to be vulnerable. When Sammy Davis Jr. died in May 1990, Frank Sinatra spoke at the funeral. He told a story about June 13th, 1971, about how Sammy had sung One for My Baby and made him cry in front of 3,000 people. "I was supposed to be embarrassed," Frank said, his voice breaking with the memory. "A tough guy like me crying at his own retirement party. But you know what? It was the most honest moment of the entire night. Because Sammy didn't let me hide. He sang the truth, and the truth made me cry. And I'm grateful for it. Because that night, he reminded me that it's okay to feel, it's okay to be vulnerable with people you love. And that's a gift more valuable than any standing ovation." If this story of friendship, vulnerability, and the courage to be honest about emotion moved you, make sure to subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear that real strength isn't about never crying, it's about being loved enough to feel safe showing your heart. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone let their guard down and showed their true feelings? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible true stories about the legends who showed us that brotherhood sometimes means making each other cry.